Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. This is Rollin with my homies. I am your host, Santina Muha. I'm so excited to be here with my homie today. She is a writer, a director, and an activist. Please, everybody, welcome to the show, Shayna Garaya.
Wow, Santina, thank you so much for that intro. Hey, everybody.
Thank you. I love the intros. They're fun to do. Thank you so much for being here. I've been wanting to have you on my show for a while. I thought you were very talented the moment I discovered who you were. And that was at the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge a few years ago. We both had films in the challenge that year, films that did very well that year, actually. And we met at the award ceremony, right?
Yeah, and the feeling was like more than mutual because I remember going up to you and being like, I love Take It Back. Like I still remember the name. I still remember your performance. It was a film that I related to a lot. And yeah, we sat together awards night. So that was fun.
Yes, you did. And yours was Helping Hands, right?
Human Helper.
Am I saying it right? Human Helper. I was Human Helper. And it was, you had Nicole Hansen starring in it, and she did really I just thought her performance was so great and very just like it was like a good, like a nuanced, I mean, it's hard to pack that much in a short 5-minute film, and you really did. And you directed and wrote that film, right? Because those are two of your specialties. Do you have any interest in acting at all, or are you just a behind the scenes girl?
I'm a behind the scenes girl. I'm fine with panels, fine with everything, scared of acting. No, I'll save that to the professionals like you and Nicole Evans. I remember like when we were filming Human Helper, Nicole was like remembering lines on the spot because I was changing lines up until that day. So she was such a pro at it, and I can't imagine like having that talent. It's incredible.
It is a talent. And speaking of remembering lines, I called her Nicole Hansen before because I always do that because I had a friend growing up named Nicole Hansen who I don't speak to anymore. Then I met Nicole Evans, and she sort of reminded me of my friend Nicole Hansen and sort of replaced her in my life. And so I can't get it out of my head that that's her name. But anyway, that's okay. When I interview her, I will get her name correct. So I'm just like, you really did look scared when I said, do you have any acting aspirations? You're like, no, like as if I was going to put you, like say, do a soliloquy or something. I'm not going to. But that's great. I think that's cool because I think it's really important to have representation behind the scenes, because I know we talk so much about we're not seeing enough disability on screen, and it's so true. And I know that a huge part of that is because we're not seeing enough of it behind, right? I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's huge, especially like coming up as a director right now. I feel like there is much more of a push for actors with disabilities rather than crew behind the scenes, right? Like if you have a movie about a person with a disability, having a director with a disability is still a conversation that's not being had. Mm-hmm. And so even with my film like Wheelchair Wendy, it's a 5-minute like film that I use dolls to make, right? And the doll was in a wheelchair, but Nicole Evans voiced the doll's character. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a really big deal. People didn't think we were going to go that far with the representation. But it's really important to me that even behind the scenes for those characters, like every layer of them is authentic and coming from an authentic place. So I am really hoping, like, as I rise up, now I'm at Netflix writing on a show called Boons and Curses. And I'm just hoping to help more people, bring more people up with me who are writers with disabilities, and to have them be in shows that aren't necessarily about disability. Right? Because we don't just have one lane. Like we can do anything we want and also spread our knowledge to other types of shows.
Right.
And get that added inclusion.
Is the show you're working on Netflix, is there a character with a disability on the show?
That I can't say yet, but I will smile.
Oh, okay.
And cool. Seem happy and be happy and enthusiastic because it's, I love the show. It's a great team. We can expect great things from it.
Okay, great. Is this the animation show you're working on, or is this?
Yeah,
it's animated, right? Okay, that's very exciting. I think because like I know that I've been hired as a consultant for shows that have characters in wheelchairs and things like that, but it's like, okay, I guess I could consult on but why not be in the writer's room? Why not have people just from the get-go?
Exactly. And I want to brag a little bit about what I can talk about because we're so early on in our process that I can't say too much of what's happening with our show. Mm-hmm. But another show that was announced is called Mech Cadet U, and it's another animated show. I believe it has a tentative release date of 2023. And I know writer Ashley Eakin wrote for that, and they do have a character with a disability. And the poster was released, and that character is on the poster. And so I think, having Ashley be a part of the room must have been such a formative experience and must have really influenced how, like, the authenticness of that storyline for that character. So I do think, especially with Netflix animation, I'm kind of blown away by how much inclusive content is going to be coming out within the next 3 years. Like how much people with disabilities are being included, are being talked about at all levels.
That's what TV does, like, remember, I remember when we were in the 90s when it was like Will and Grace, Queer Eye, Ellen, like all of these things sort of all started happening around the same time. And it was like, yay. And then, and it was like a boom or whatever. And I remember when that happened thinking, oh, I can't wait until this happens with disability, this boom. And then, like I said, in the 90s, and I'm still like, okay, well, anytime now, we're gonna have a boom anytime. So yeah, maybe we're heading towards the boom.
We're heading towards the boom, but I also like to clarify that we're heading towards the boom because people like us are pushing and fighting, right? And I think we hold the majority of that credit. Nobody's giving things to us. We're really pushing ourselves into spaces that we're not welcomed and that we don't belong, right? Or we haven't historically belonged. Yeah. So we're the ones fighting. And unfortunately, like, if we want that big boom to happen, we just have to keep pushing, which is sad. And that shouldn't be the case. But yeah.
I mean, I agree. But I think that will make it all the more, like, because we know, right? So we're all just so proud of each other, I think, and excited. Yeah. And I think that's a good shift too. This sort of, I'm seeing a lot more support, over jealousy and over things like that. And that's, I think, encouraging. How did you get to write on this show? I mean, how did that all come about? Because nobody has like the same path, right? And nobody, disability or not, there is no one straight path, I feel like, to Hollywood. So how did you get there?
Yeah, so nobody has a straight path. And this is one of the things I'm very open about, because I really, again, want to encourage other people and other talent to rise up. I got noticed at a festival, and it was actually Superfest, which is a disability film festival. My film, Wheelchair Wendy, that was made with dolls for not very much money, that I filmed in my apartment over a course of 3 days. And I like to tell people this to, like, encourage them to go out and shoot their own projects, right? Because they don't have to, like, go to the desert and spend thousands of dollars. They can just do it with what's around them, right? Like, I just had dolls around me. I had a dream house around me. Like, and so, yeah, I did that. It got into that festival. Somebody was there who, got me a general. And then from there, it snowballed. And I ended up being a perfect fit for this show. And I'm so grateful. And it happened within a matter of months.
Wow. And so when did you make Wheelchair Wendy?
So Wheelchair Wendy, I made quite a long, like 2018, I made it. But I was still in college. And so I graduated from college 2020. I was looking for festivals to apply to because I was like, what else am I doing? It's pandemic, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, most things were shut down. And then I applied to Superfest with it. And then from there, when Superfest happened, it was a matter of months before I was in talks to be on this show.
That's amazing. So you made the film a few years ago, but you just sort of had it. You didn't do anything with it. And then during COVID, during like the time of, make your own things happen, you made your own thing happen, and now you're staffed. I mean, I hope people are listening to this. I really do, because that's a great story. I mean, it's just a great story. It just is.
And that's the thing. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it aired at Real Abilities LA in 2018. And that was a big deal for me too, career-wise. That's how I got connected to Nick Novicki. That's how I found out about Easter Seals. Because I really wasn't aware of, like, the creatives with disability space in LA. Because I'm not from LA, right? And so then, applying to Superfest, I think a lot of people think unless you get your film into like Tribeca, Sundance, South by Southwest, like you're not going to get it noticed by anybody. But in reality, that is really wrong because so many great films end up in those festivals. And so many great films end up at Superfest too, but I feel like it's such a niche audience. So like, the people that go to them are people that are serious about the work and about putting the work in for inclusion, right?
Yeah.
And so like if somebody goes to Superfest, they're really taking their time out. They're really like thrilled to be there and to be watching content about people with disabilities. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just different than sitting through the whole of Sundance,
It becomes almost like a quality over quantity thing. Not that the quality of Sundance is bad, obviously, but it's like a small fish in a big pond kind of.
It's like a niche thing. Yeah, I think there's so many different types of films at Sundance. Whereas at Superfest, we have one commonality through all of them,
mm-hmm.
right?
Where is Superfest?
Superfest is in the Bay Area.
Oh, okay. And where are you from? Are you from the Bay Area?
So my dad actually immigrated to the Bay Area when he was 14 from India.
Okay.
And so like we were there for a very brief amount of time when I was like young, can't remember. And so I'm from Sacramento, which is the state's capital. And I actually wanted to go into politics and I worked for a bit in the capital. And then I was just like, no, things take too long to get done at this level. Like I can be loud and angry in filmmaking and get things done faster.
Yes, right. And then also sometimes it feels like you're preaching to the choir. I feel like, when you're doing creative things, I feel like you have a better chance of reaching people who don't want to hear it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always say like I trick people into learning something about whatever by doing what I'm doing. So, I always ask my guests about your sort of origin story, or like, how do you identify as a person with a disability? Like, what is your journey there?
Yeah. So it's like, it's funny because when I was a kid, I used to like make up all these stories as to how I became disabled to like make people think I was cool. Because people would always ask, right? And it's like, there was nothing exciting or glamorous about it. Like it just happened. I was just born with it. I have spinal muscular atrophy. I was born at it. By the age of like 4 or 5, I was a wheelchair user. And I got my first wheelchair in hot pink. Like it was just kind of like rolling with things as they came. And I was never like, oh man, I never experienced a period of grief for what I had, for the ability that I had lost. Right.
Because when you're younger, it's like, okay, you're crawling, then you're walking. Nobody seems to panic about that. So then you're in a wheelchair. It's like, what's the difference? Why is this one okay and this one's bad? Because you're too young to know and to have anything to compare it to, right?
Exactly. So there was never like a period of grief, but it was a period of longing, right? Of wanting what other people had. And that was only because I felt othered, right? Like it wasn't because I wanted that. It was because I just wanted to blend in. Like I wanted people to accept me.
Did you feel a certain age, like a shift or anything?
I think, so the age really came for me, and it's so late, but it came for me in college. I think I did a pretty good job of assimilating throughout elementary, middle, and high school. And I was kind of just like staying in this safe comfort zone where I was in my small suburb, right? Everybody kind of knew me. They had all grown up with me. Mm-hmm. So I was eventually accepted there. And I also just didn't talk about my disability a lot. And then I go off to college, still in Sacramento, but obviously it's a big university. And I didn't even have a desk to sit at for the first like year and a half of classes, of most of my classes. There was no accessible desk. I kept going to the Office of Students with Disabilities, and they kept telling me like, oh, there's nothing we can do. They were horrible, absolutely horrible.
Where did you go to college?
This was Sacramento State University. And so it was absolutely awful. I kept going to meetings with them, trying to get things changed. It wasn't working. And then I also, I would literally like find people with disabilities. It's unfortunate that obviously you can't see invisible disabilities, but I got to the point where I was just tracking people down who were in wheelchairs, because I wanted to know their experiences to see if I was the only one on campus who was going through this. And so we got a little bit of a community together, and I found out that I wasn't. And so I got really pissed and angry, which is one of my things. I'm kind of fueled by rage. And I got a GoPro. I stuck it on my wheelchair, and for 6 weeks I filmed secretly my experiences on campus. And then I intercut it with interviews from the other students with disabilities, which we also did in secret. Bless my crew. And I wasn't even a film major at the time. I didn't even think this was my path. I was just like mad and angry, and I wanted to use social media for something. And then I just cut it together and put it up online. And then I didn't think it would get the response it got, because honestly, like looking back, it wasn't very well made. I was still learning. But it got like over 500 views in one night. And it just spread so quickly on Facebook. And after that, we got invited to the president's office, the Sac State president's office, and big changes were made. And a lot of those people don't work at the Students for Disabilities office anymore.
I love that you're sort of just like a natural then when it comes to picking up a camera, because I like have always had thoughts and ideas of how to do stuff, but like the actual doing it sometimes trips me up, and then I don't follow through, So I love that you just did it.
At the time I was like, it was more like not even thinking of it as a video. It was just like, this is just something, it's like a social media post. That's what I was viewing it as, right?
Right.
And so I think what helped with it was that I did have a narrative voice in it, connecting it as a story. And that's when I first realized that I was a storyteller and that my perspective was needed. Because it is a documentary, but I'm not in documentary anymore. But at the same time, like that was my first insight into storytelling.
So did the success of that make you want to dive deeper into storytelling at all? Or what made you finally say, you know what, this is the path I'm going down?
Yeah, so the success of that really pushed me in that direction. Thankfully, like I was on a news program in Sacramento, and then my professors were like, look, you have something here that you can explore. And so I pursued communications with an emphasis in film as a major at Sacramento State. I had some of the best professors. They really helped me. And then in my senior year, I still say this, but in my senior year, in my advanced film class, they were handing out cameras for a warm-up exercise. The TA was, and I got to her and she was about to hand the camera to me, but she saw me, she saw the wheelchair, and she's like, do you even know how to work this? And then I was like, all right, there's still a lot of work to be done, because at the time I was coming off of a high from the documentary. I was like, wow, changes are going to be made. And then in a senior production class, which I have more than earned my way in, I'm still being questioned. Yeah. So that really made me realize, like, okay, there's so much work to be done, obviously. And again, the rage kind of propelled me to start looking at what my options were after college, because I love Sacramento, but I didn't want to stay here, if that made sense. Like I wanted to learn more and grow as a filmmaker, and there are limited options. If you're not in LA, right? It's LA is the hub. And so my professor actually told me, he's like, apply to USC. I applied to UC Berkeley because they had a program where people with disabilities could have caregivers on campus, and they would like kind of take care of that for you. And then that was scrapped. That was taken out. That program, unfortunately, they lost funding for it. It's really sad. And I applied to UC Berkeley for grad school, and their building wasn't accessible to the building that I applied for.
Wow, the amount of money that these schools put into sports and things,
Yeah.
Frustrating. It's frustrating, like, to know that something like that would get cut when they could pay for it with the one night of concessions sales, probably.
Yeah. So UC Berkeley was my top, mainly because I didn't think I'd get into USC, and two, I just knew Berkeley. I knew that world. I knew the Bay Area. My dad was from there. It felt safe. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't accessible. So then my parents were like, let's drive to USC. And we didn't really know the reputation behind USC, right? Both my parents are immigrants. They never realized how good it was. Sorry, they're like yelling in the background right now. They're watching a sports game. And so we drove to USC, and I remember like my dad got onto the School of Cinematic Arts campus where you see the Lucas and Spielberg buildings, and he's like, this is why we immigrated. He's like, you're going here. And we were floored. We were shell-shocked. We were floored because, my dad works at a trucking company. My mom was a paraeducator. We don't have a lot. I remember somebody asking me on like the first day of USC, like, oh, what area of entertainment do your parents work in? And I'm like, none. Like, I don't know this world at all. So that's kind of what happened. And my professors heavily pushed me to apply to USC. So kudos to them for getting me here.
Yeah. Did you live on campus then?
Yeah, so I lived on campus. I have a bit of an interesting and it's not really a rare story, I think, the more I've talked to people about it. So my mom actually worked as a paraeducator, and she quit her job because the issue, of course, with SSI and caregiving in this state, in this country, is that even if you are a person who needs 24-hour care, you will probably not get 24-hour care. And so I am not, in the government's eyes, needy enough for 24-hour care, even though I do need it to do basic tasks like dressing, bathing. And so my mom quit her job and moved with me into an apartment. And, I could go to class myself and do all that myself, but she was basically there. We'd go home once a month, see my dad. He kind of held down the fort at my house, and he's also, the main caregiver for my grandparents. And so it was one of those things where there were all these obstacles, but my family made it work because they joke that I'm their retirement plan. But I'm super grateful to them. It's everything that I have is really because of them.
So are you an only child?
No, I have an older brother, and he also helps. He's still here at home, and he helps like with my grandparents and stuff. We look after each other a lot, and I think that's the Indianness in us,
Yeah. What does he do?
So he works for an insurance company right now.
Do you think he ever was jealous of any of the attention that you were receiving from them? Just wondering.
No, and that's a really good question to ask. I know, like, it's funny because Nicole Evans and I have had these conversations too, like about siblings. And I think my parents did a really good job of showing us equal attention. Him probably even more so than me, because I'm very much like, he was never a great student. Like, that just wasn't his thing, which is fine. We're not all like good at, taking multiple choice tests and and so, they would joke that like, I'm kind of the one who they need to be more hands off with. With him, they need to be more hands on because, he just struggled in school. And so he needed that extra help. And so I think they did a good job of that. And he and I had a really good relationship. Like, I would hang out with him all the time. I still hang out with him. We play video games together a lot. Like, yeah, we're really good friends.
That's
more than just siblings. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, and you're all living under the same roof right now?
In pandemic, yes.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so great.
It is.
I on the other hand, have not seen my mother in 2 years almost because of the pandemic. She's in, yeah, I know. But I love that you guys are making it work like that. That's really nice. Were you living with them before the pandemic?
No, so I was still in LA, and we were trying to figure out that situation, like how I would stay. And so after pandemic, I'm most likely, I am, I'm going to be moving back to LA. So it's figuring out that transition. And it is going to be a transition in terms of like getting me care to where I can be independent.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be like overnight where I move there and, my parents move back here. yeah, it's going to take some months.
So, yes, right. So how has it been working on this Netflix show and not being in LA? Has everything been over virtual, Zoom?
Yeah, everything's been over Zoom. And like our team is so cognizant of our mental health right now. Especially because you must know, Santina, like being on Zoom, we're on Zoom for about 6 hours a day, right? Mm-hmm. Roughly, give or take. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to stay creative and inspired when you're staring at a screen for that long. But they're just so like, they're like, you can turn your video camera off if that helps, right? You can take breaks. Like we take so many breaks, so many 10-minute breaks just to recharge and energize ourselves. And it is very much like our mental health is a priority. It's the first priority of the room. But I have found that we've bonded so much. And we are kind of like a big family now.
That's really cool. So you're in this sort of virtual writer's room. Have you been in a non-virtual writer's room before, or have you just mostly worked on your own stuff? No. So yeah. Oh my God, it's like dogs that were adopted during the pandemic. They're like, what's the other world look like? I don't know.
Exactly. It's just like that. And it's so funny because like some of the people who are on the show have worked at Netflix before, like pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so they always talk about like, oh, remember at Netflix when we used to get meals and stuff for free and breakfast? And I'm like, oh, I want that life.
I know.
When did I have it?
Everyone to be like, there's a Italian ice truck outside today or something. Like, yeah, I know. It will come back, but those are the perks, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I know. I don't know, like, it's cool that you guys are bonding. I'm in a memoir writing class right now that started like way back in the beginning of the pandemic, and we just kept re-upping, and we've spent pretty much every Wednesday together since, because now it's not really a class, now it's more of just like a memoir writing support group or something. But we read our stuff and we bounce ideas off each other, we hold each other accountable. And yeah, it's like, I know these people know things about me that some of my friends don't even know, because it's a memoir writing class. So it's like basically reading your journal to people every week. And you do become very connected to them, even though you're not in the same room. Do you think that as a person with a disability, you just feel like, well, I'm so used to adapting, of course I was going to adapt to this?
Yes, 100%, right? And then there's also this, it was so weird, Santina, and you probably went through this too. But like when pandemic hit, suddenly it was all Zoom interviews, right?
Yep.
And so I had about 3 interviews, and it was funny because they were like all in the same week. And I ended up going with, this Netflix show, which was great, but like nobody knew I was in a wheelchair.
Yes, it's like, so that was my film from Easter Seals, the one before, it was called Full Picture, because that's what was happening. I kept meeting people like this, and then they didn't know I was in a wheelchair. And then I met this one person, a friend's roommate, and like a week later they were watching a movie that I happened to be in, and he was like, why didn't you tell me she was in a wheelchair? And she was like, it did not come up when would I have told you that, and why? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what was it job interviewing like that?
See, and it's like I let people know right up front. But it was one of those things that was weird to tell people, because I feel like when you go in person and you see people, right, and they see it, it's automatic. But it's weird to be on a Zoom call with someone who you don't think is a wheelchair user, and then to suddenly say it. I feel like people don't know how to respond. Yes, like non-disabled people.
Did you see you have to see this documentary that I did. I'm going to say.
I need to see it. I think I've watched a lot of pandemic.
I know. It happens. Believe me, it happens. I know. Remember I called your film, what did I call it before? No. Oh.
Hands. I don't know. It's fine. So it's pandemic brain, right?
Completely. I get it. Yes, I get it. But it's the same thing. Yeah, it's like that's what we did, this thing where I had a little conversation with them, and then my producers afterwards asked them all these questions about me, and then the producers were like, okay, and did you notice she's in a wheelchair? And some of them were like, oh no, I didn't. And some of them were like, what? Why? How? I don't understand. And then it was like, okay, well, now I want to ask you a few questions about her. Let's see how it changes. And some of them, it really changed, because I think some people, once they know you're in a wheelchair, they put everything through the disability lens or through a disability filter. And it's like, oh, she's so strong because she's in a wheelchair. And it's like, no. Or she's so talented because she's done all of this in a wheelchair. And it's like, no. Please, just look at what I'm doing, you know?
Exactly. It was such a weird experience. I'm glad I had that experience though. Like, I'm glad I was able to go through that where it didn't matter. And like on one of the interviews, I just left it till the very end, right? And then, because I wanted to see what it was like to go through an interview without.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, so how was that? Was that different at all?
I felt like more of an expert. Like they treated me like more of an expert. And also they didn't, when it came to scheduling and like how many hours you would be on set and this and that, they weren't weird about it. They were just like, this is what's going to happen. And they expected me to be able to do that. Whereas normally if they see that I'm a wheelchair user, they're unsure of if I can do that. They tread lightly. They'll be like, if you can, and that's fine to say those kind of things, like, but you need to be saying them to everybody. Like if you're asking me if I need accommodations, you need to be saying them to everybody because you don't know who's going to be needing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm starting to talk about more, you know? Totally. Oh my gosh. I really like appreciate what this whole Zoom experience did for us. And I also really appreciate the fact that, you know, a lot of these writers' rooms and things are realizing, and like table reads, I'm on a show right now and every table read we've done has been over Zoom because why do we all have to congregate in Covina or wherever the hell, I forget where we're even shooting, and just for a 30-minute table read. And everybody, you know, who has to watch it, all the, you know, producers, production, everybody, writers, they can all just watch it. We don't have to all get in the same room. Why?
Definitely.
LA does not need more people on the road besides disability, you know, just whatever. It's a great, it saves you a whole day, you know, because you don't have to spend 2 hours driving there and, you know, maybe 3 hours driving back because of traffic. I think it's done great things. And I hope that it's something that continues way past the pandemic. I hope, we'll say.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience here, and it is, what is the hardest thing about working in Hollywood? What do you say?
It's so weird because I've talked to people and I get like, it runs the gamut, right? Like I'm a staff writer and I just started my journey 4 years ago, and people keep telling me like how lucky and how privileged I am. And a part of me is like, I worked my ass off. I'm not sure if I can curse, so I'm sorry, but I worked so hard to get to this position. And so when I tell people that like breaking in is the hardest part, people kind of like scoff or think like, oh, it came so quickly. So, you know, for you. And it's like, yeah, it came quickly for me, but I had so many things going in the fire so that one thing could finally erupt, right? And I mean, ask any of my friends, I was like working 10 hours almost every day in college, right? I was working weekends all the time just to figure out how I was going to make this work because the stakes were so high for me. And it's literally like I was telling a friend, it's like, get rich or just have no caregiving for my life because that's the system that's in place, right? Like my parents can only do so much, but I'm really worried for what happens after my parents. And so that was kind of driving me to have as many things going as I could so that I can be financially stable to in the future support myself in terms of caregiving, right? And being able to pay for that like ridiculous, being able to pay for that cost that I shouldn't have to bear, that the government should really be helping me fund. And so breaking in is the hardest thing in Hollywood and getting a shot, especially as a disabled woman. And I can't tell you if there's the right way to do it because there are so many different ways. But I can say that like, make a film, you know, make a 5-minute film with what's around you and just get it out there to amazing festivals like Superfest or Easter Seals or Real Abilities LA, because now executives are finally taking those festivals seriously and they're coming out to see the content because there's amazing content in there.
Yeah.
And also like with Slam Dance now having an Unstoppable category.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge major festival. And so like make something on your budget with what you have around you. And as long as it has a good story, like it's going to get noticed.
Yeah. Did you have anything in Slam Dance this year? I can't remember.
I did. I had Human Helper, and then I had a music video that I made with Angela Rockwood.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We're all, we were bound to meet because we are friends with a lot of the same people. We work with a lot of the same people. I had Full Picture premiered at Slam Dance this year in the Ensemble. I gotta see it. You mentioned being a disabled woman, right? And then also I don't know if you mentioned this before when we were speaking or on the interview, but that your father immigrated here from India.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about intersectionality a little bit. What do you feel like you've been discriminated against more as a woman, as an Indian, or as a person in a wheelchair, or how does it work being all of these things? What do you think?
It's funny because I think the wheelchair is such a big visible part of me that I think that's the only discrimination that gets through, right? Like it's like people can't even comprehend discriminating me on the female level because the wheelchair is just so present.
Right.
I really do think it's that. And then I think as a woman, I really haven't, possibly in some instances at USC, right? Where it's like I was seen as the wheelchair, like wasn't seen as a discriminating factor. It was the fact that I was a woman. But in those instances, instead of being angry, I'd be like, wow, this is a new experience. It was still horrible, but like also very interesting to me that people saw me for a woman. But I do remember, like, in terms of intersectionality growing up, like I got my first wheelchair in hot pink, right?
Yeah.
And that was because I really wanted to be feminine. Like I felt like I wasn't in this current body, right? And so I thought getting in hot pink would help.
Mine was too. I'm with you. Yeah.
See, and then like, being Indian, I hoarded a lot of Barbies to like, that was my way of assimilating to the American culture, right? Hoarding all these Barbies to get friends to come over. And so, and then the third thing to that was just like getting great grades to kind of hide my disability. And so that's the intersectionality for me. That's all the things I tried to do to assimilate to the modern culture.
That's so interesting. I thought getting great grades would hide your disability. Why?
Yeah, this is internalized ableism, right? Like my own internalized ableism at such a young age.
I have internalized ableism that made me want to not get good grades, that made me want to be more of like a rebel, smoke cigarettes, like do kind of like, make out. Like I was like, I'm not going to study. So I'm interested to know what, we all get these ideas in our head. They're all just in our heads, right? Because neither one of us was right or wrong, right? So what made you think that getting good grades was the way to sort of go rogue?
Yeah. So I think I did want to go rogue like you did in high school, right? That was definitely a thing that I wanted to do. But my first like internalized ableism that I had to conquer was in elementary school, where teachers like wouldn't call on me. They'd ignore me. They wouldn't want me in their classes, right? Like they would kind of try to pass me off to other teachers because I would automatically, and this is so wrong too. It's so wrong on so many levels. Like they would automatically think that I wasn't up to par with the other students. But at the same time, even if you don't have the same capabilities mentally as other students, it doesn't mean that you're like less than at all.
I know.
And that's where it's such a huge problem that is more than just if we get good grades, we can like pretend, But
it just also doesn't make sense to me because you are just very well spoken. I can only imagine that you've always been. I can just sort of tell, right? I feel like you've always been probably one of the smartest people in the room, or just like you're aware, like you just, I feel like you get it, you see what's going on. And I don't know how anybody could not see that, just because first of all, everyone's sitting down in a classroom, right?
Yeah,
like you sit down, you get dumber. You know, it just feels very arbitrary to me.
It feels arbitrary. And then they figured out I was smart and that they could use me to boost their grades. So then like later in my elementary years, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, like teachers wanted me in the room. But my whole thing was, even if you're not matching some weird IQ level, right? Even if you're not passing tests that are historically racist, like we've proved that, right? Like you shouldn't be looked down upon as less than at all.
Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, period.
Everybody has different ways of thinking. I mean, the discrimination that people who are neurodivergent face, like it's such a big structural educational like problem. It just needs to be upheld. Like,
yeah, and you're like a young woman. It's not like you went to elementary school in the like 20s or something. I mean, I don't know what years it would had to be well after the ADA was passed, right? Because
I was born in 95. Yeah.
Right. So you were right. And the ADA was passed in 90. So these teachers had plenty of time to adjust and to, get with the program. And they're teachers. That's the thing. These are teachers that we're talking about. We're not talking about, some, and what people want to say, like some Karen in middle America, which whatever about that. But it's just like, this is supposed to be an educator. This is supposed to be someone who is teaching kids how to act. And if the own teacher doesn't know how to deal with you, then what is that telling the kids? It's just a mess.
It's a huge mess. And I remember too, like one of the most infuriating things I had to go through was in middle school. I wanted to be a part of the honors program. And here's my thing though. People see honor students as better than, right? And that's what I hated. That is what I absolutely hate. Like, it just means you like studying, right? Yeah. Being an honor student means you just like studying a lot. And so I wanted to be in the honors program because the other curriculum wasn't doing it for me, right? Like I wanted to dive deeper. I wanted to read more. I wanted to spend my days doing homework. Like that's what made me happy, which is weird to say.
No, but elementary school, that's how I was too.
Yeah. And so in middle school, my counselor was just like, no. She told my mom, like, I can't be in the program. She said it would be too difficult for me. She did whatever she could to not have me in those classes. And then come 7th grade, I was bored in the classes. And the teachers, came up to me and they were like, why aren't you in the honors program? Like, clearly we're not doing anything for you here. And I was like, oh, well, they told me I can't be. So then they had to make a plea to get me bumped up. Yeah. And
person that had a job. It's not right. That's
yeah. And I had recommendations from my teachers to get me placed in those classes, and other students who got in didn't. And so again, it's like that minority problem, right? Like we have to do everything 100 times better.
Yes, exactly. You have to prove that you can. It's like you have to prove simultaneously that you're normal and that you're better and that you're no better. I mean, it's like it kind of exhausting to try to be all of these things at once, right?
Yep.
It's too much. It's funny because like I had a little bit of a different journey where in elementary school, I felt like I was like a celebrity because everybody wanted to be like, what's that? All the other kids were like, can I ride on the chair? Like whatever. Then in middle school and high school, I was like, this is not cool. And then in college, I felt like my peers were adults, sort of, and I felt like better. But now when I look back, right? So when I was there, I didn't have what you had in the moment of like, hey, this doesn't feel fair. I was just like, oh, well, that's the breaks. My life's harder. Oh, well, bye. I'll just, not go to that class as much. And now I look back and I'm like, wait a minute, like I wanted to study abroad in Italy, and I brought it up and they were like, oh, sorry, it's not an accessible program. And I was like, man. And now I'm like,
what does that even mean?
What?
What does that even mean? It's not accessible.
It's not an answer. And I wish I had fought for it, because I would have loved to have studied. And by the way, I speak Italian. I would have been further than most of my peers, but because there was no accessible room in the house or whatever, they were like, no, sorry, goodbye. And I just accepted it. Because I was young. I don't know. Yeah. I just didn't want to fight, or for whatever reason, I just accepted it. And I wish that I had put a GoPro on my chair and went back and asked them the same question. And maybe I would have, been able to spend some time in Italy. It's just not right.
Yeah. And I mean, I relate to just accepting things, right? I think for a long time I did that just because like the burden is on, it's internalized ableism for myself. I feel like I'm the burden. Like, I feel like, oh, okay, that's fine because this is what I deserve because I'm a lot harder to accommodate.
Yes.
So it's fair.
I was talking about this in therapy today because it applies to everything, right? It applies to work. Yeah. It applies to dating. It applies sometimes to like friendships, when we're all booking a vacation and I'm like, oh, sorry, but that hotel doesn't have an accessible room. Can we? And then I'm like, oh God, I bet they wish that they didn't invite me. But it's like, I don't know. Yeah. First of all, if anyone's thinking that, are they really my friend? No. But what we talked about today with my therapist was how it's not me, it's the situation. But I have been so intertwined with my situation for so long because like in elementary school, it wasn't my burden. I was just like, hey, that's not right. Oh, well, like that should change. Like, I thought the world should change for me. But then as you get older, you start to adapt. And then it becomes harder to detach yourself from the situation.
Yeah. Yep. It becomes harder to unlearn that internalized ableism that's been pounded into you, right?
Yes.
And so I love that you brought up therapy though, because I do want to hit home on that point. Like, I have PTSD due to like a really not great hospital experience. And for the longest time, I was in denial about it because I didn't think that someone like me could get PTSD. Like, I just didn't think that. I was like, okay, I'm born with a disability. That's fine. But I didn't like go off to war. I didn't have I wasn't in an accident, right? Like, there were all these things that I was just like, oh, I just went to a hospital and had a really like shitty time. And so, when I had a panic attack during class, one of my friends helped me get to the hospital. And it wasn't like nobody knew I had a panic attack. Like, only one person knew. Because it's one of those things where it's silent, it's building inside. And I just went to the hospital and they were like, yeah, you have like really bad anxiety, like you need to get checked out. And so I started therapy and I figured out I had PTSD. And ever since then, I'm like, people need to go to therapy if they can, if they have the chance. Like, therapy is great. I love it. Go once a week. It's an incredible experience.
It's funny you say that because I also have PTSD from the hospital, and I didn't. It's so interesting you're saying this because and I knew that like certain things would trigger me, right, and make me have reactions that were bigger than I thought that they should be. And I was just like, why I'm such a baby. Grow up. You're an adult now. These things shouldn't scare you as much as they do. And all it took was for this very, very smart neuropsychologist who was working at Cedars and came into my room because I was having a panic attack from the beeps. It wasn't even a thing. It was just the sound. And, he came in and talked to me, and all he did was label it. And like, I've heard of PTSD before, but once he told me I had it and just labeled it, then all of a sudden, it's not like it went away, but I just have been able to deal with it so much better. And now when the beeps happen or someone comes in to, draw blood, I start to panic, I can say to myself, oh, this is your PTSD kicking in, not, oh, you're a baby. So now I'm not beating myself up on top of the panic attack, and it helps, right?
It totally helps. And Santina, those triggers are mine too. Like, I had nightmares about people coming to draw blood.
Yes.
Like, it's horrible. Like, that experience was so bad. The beeps trigger me.
Yes.
Flashing lights triggered me for a long time.
In college, we talked about college. I had to ask my roommates, and I didn't know why, but I was just like, hey, please, for your alarm, can you set it to music? Because I can't get woken up by beeps. It like makes me just makes me, and that's because of PTSD, because they would just beep, beep. You know, you would get woken up by the machines or whatever, or someone would come in like 6 a.m. to draw blood, and they would wake you up out of a dead sleep to just start poking you. I mean, it's a lot. And when you're little, the body keeps the score. Have you read that book, The Body Keeps the Score?
No.
Okay, it will be recommended to you. So just let me save you some time before everyone starts recommending. You've got to read this book or listen to it. I listened to it. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. I recommend it to anybody out there who's watching. I mean, it could be, you could have trauma from birth, you know, like the body keeps the score, right? Listen to that book or read it.
I mean, I'll listen to that, but there's also like intergenerational trauma, right? And that's another thing too that I like didn't even realize. And, you know, as an Indian woman, like there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so it really is like, therapy is such a great resource. It's really inaccessible, which sucks, but like it's so invaluable if you have the opportunity to get it. Like, even if you don't have PTSD, even if there's no label on you, right?
They should have it in school, you know, like sort of health, gym, whatever, you know, how they rotate that out. I think that therapy should be this way for people who, because, you know, there's people who will be like in their 20s or 30s and they're like, oh, I've never, and I'm like, how? Because I've been in therapies on and off since I was 5 years old, because they just started coming into and out of the hospital. And some years I needed it, and some years I didn't. That's another thing people don't understand, I think, about therapy too, is that you can go in and out of it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can use it. I used it for about 2 months at USC. Then I stopped for a bit in pandemic. Now I'm back on it. Like, you can go in and out of it. You can change therapists. Like, it evolves based on your needs. Yeah,
exactly. And that's another thing that I really love about Zoom and stuff. Like, because I've been seeing my therapist over Zoom since the pandemic. I mean, we didn't miss a beat, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I agree. I think it should be more. I mean, we can't even start to talk about health care and what should be provided and what should, because that conversation is like, it's not even like a whole other episode. It's like a whole other like series. But I think that a lot of the work that you're doing just like creatively is moving the needle. And that's the thing that's great about, for me, what I love about the television industry is that it's not just like vapid and it's not just whatever, especially for people with disabilities. I think that because here's the thing, even if you're a person with a disability and you're just playing like a dumb cheerleader, you're still moving the needle, because we have not really seen enough of that. And it's still showing people that we can do, because like be all these different things, you know. I think it's still important. Even if you're doing a vapid thing, like when I was in high school, I was like, I don't want to be an activist. I have no interest in that. I'm going to be a cheerleader. And then everyone was like, how great, a cheerleader in a wheelchair. And I'm like, damn it, I'm still doing it, you know?
No, exactly. And it's like, you know, I'm hoping to direct my feature film sometime next year, right?
Yes.
And it's about a woman with a disability who, you know, wants to get revenge, right? And so, again, it's like understanding that she's not a villain and that she has agency is a really big deal as a woman with a disability, right? Because I feel like all too often we're either seen as the villain, right, because of our anger. And I really want to flip that narrative, especially with like movies coming out like Promising Young Woman. Like, revenge stories need to be told, and they need to be told in a good way that makes us out to be what we are, which is angry, and rightfully so.
Yes, and nuanced, and like anger comes from hurt, or anger comes from grief, or from something. It doesn't come from just, you know, having a disability or just one thing. It comes from like how you know, externalize the hurt.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, like, people think, oh, people with disabilities are angry because of their disability. Like, no, we're angry because of the way ableist society treats us. We're angry because of the government and the like limitations they keep placing. Like, that's why I'm angry. I am happy with myself. I love my body. Right. Yeah. And so again, so it's like villains that have disabilities tend to be very two-dimensional, like you said. We don't get that period of grief. We don't get that period of like can they love? Is there redemption? Like, we just don't see that. So I'm really hoping to bring a 3-dimensional character to the forefront who's also a badass, fiery woman.
Please do. Please. And I know you can, and I know you will. And I know whatever you do is going to be really good because, well, I haven't seen anything to prove otherwise yet. So, and by the way, also, we don't all have to do great things all the time. It's about trial and error. And like you said, you didn't even know if this Barbie thing was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And it did. Or like you said about the project you did in college, you're like, it wasn't even that good, but it still propelled you, right? It still, you learned from it. And then the next time you do something like that, it will be that much better because you did, that version. You have to try.
You have to try. You have to put yourself out there and fail forward. Like if you're going to fail forward.
Right. Yes. Fail forward. And also bring somebody with you.
Yes. Always. And that is my goal. You climb to the top, you bring people up, and then you tear down the system and make it better.
Yeah. Well,
my evil master plan.
I believe you will do it. I truly cannot believe we're at the end of this interview. I really can't. I have so much more to ask you. So I hope I'll have you back sometime because I feel like more to talk about. But this was such a great conversation. I really do. I really think you're just like so intelligent and so creative. And it really excites me to know that someone like you is, on that side, because growing up watching TV and just wishing I saw more of me. I don't know. I have hope that little girls and little boys, in wheelchairs are going to not have to feel as isolated, I think.
Definitely. And thank you for having me on the show. Like, I can't wait for you to see some of the content that, Netflix animation is doing in the next couple of years. Just, there's a lot to be excited about. And I'm happy to be helping bringing that in.
I love that. And I also just recently discovered how much I love doing voices. I just voiced my first cartoon for a Netflix show that's coming out in the fall. And I hope I get to voice a character with a disability someday.
Yes.
That would be so cool. But I have to say it also was cool voicing a character without a disability because it was like finally, I was like, finally, I took a job from somebody. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yep. Totally. Well, anyway, I can't believe we have to end that. I don't want to, but we do. We have to. We've come to the end. Thank you again so much. Where can people follow you or see what you're working on?
Yeah, you can follow me on my Instagram. It's at disabled_DESI. Desi is like a cultural term in India. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I also have a website, which is my first and last name.com.
Okay, great. Everybody do that because you're going to want to see what Shayna's doing next, trust me. And everyone else, thank you for being here. Rolling with My Homies was presented today by Outside In Theater. If you would like to support the channel, you can subscribe below, or you could visit www.outsideintheater.org for more information. And of course, you can follow me and Shayna on social media, me at Santina Muha, Shayna at disabled_Desi. And if you want to rewatch our show, check out my YouTube. Or if you want to share it with someone, check it out. Check it out on YouTube. Please share, comment, like, all those things that, get us more attention. That's what we need. Thank you, everybody. Have a very safe few weeks, and we'll see you next time on Rolling with My Homies. Bye.